say a hacker group demanded ransom in exchange for returning control. We're broadcasting from NHK in Tokyo.
Marketplace is supported by Grammarly, offering Grammarly Business to help companies large and small communicate better and move faster with enterprise-grade generative artificial intelligence. Learn more at grammarly.com/business.
There's a lot to like in the latest jobs report, unless you're on Wall Street, I guess. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Charles Schwab. Schwab understands that wealth management is personal. That's why Schwab offers flexible, personalized financial planning crafted for their investors' individual goals. Learn more at schwab.com.
From Baltimore, I'm Amy Scott, in for Kai Rizdal, who is on assignment in China, covering Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit. More from him later in the program. It's Friday, July 7th. Good to have you with us. The U.S. economy is still creating jobs, though at a slower pace. That's the big takeaway from today's employment situation report from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Jobs outside of farming grew by 209,000 in June. That's the slowest pace since late 2020. And turns out that job growth in April and May was slower than initially estimated by a combined 110,000 jobs. So joining me to make sense of these numbers are Heather Long at The Washington Post and Sudeep Reddy at Politico. Good to have you both here.
Hi, Amy.
Hi.
So Heather, starting with you, what's your initial response to this report today?
Oh, how about a B-plus report in the sense that there's a little something for everybody here. You know, if you're a job seeker, look, things slow down a little bit, but there's still a lot of jobs out there, a lot of hiring going on, particularly in government, healthcare, social assistance, and construction. I mean, come on, construction, which we all expected would have slowed down in this high interest rate environment, continues to add jobs at a pretty robust pace. If you're the Federal Reserve, you're looking at this and seeing a little bit of sigh of relief. As you were saying, it's a little bit slower pace of job growth. And, you know, there seem to be some signs like the temporary hires we actually saw was negative again for this month. So, you know, we may be able to avoid a recession and achieve this mythical soft landing if things keep growing like this. Labor force keeps growing and we kind of gently slow down.
Sudeep, I wonder, though, was this surprising given yesterday's ADP numbers, which showed like almost 500,000 jobs created by the private sector? I think people were starting to think, is job growth even stronger than we thought it was?
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's a labor force of almost 167 million people, and we're talking about maybe 20,000 here, a couple 100,000 here or there. What is actually most surprising about this labor market is how steady and sturdy it has been over the last year. We've had the Fed just pummeling the economy with 10 interest rate increases. We've had Silicon Valley Bank. We've had 7% mortgage rates. We've had all of these things hanging over us, and what we've basically got one of the steadiest periods of job growth that we've seen. The numbers are obviously showing that there's been some slowdown in the pace of job growth from a year ago, but it is still a job market where people who want jobs can get jobs of some kind. It's just getting a little bit more complicated than it once was.
Heather, Sudeep just mentioned 10 interest rate increases. Does this all but lock in another one at the Fed meeting later this month?
It seems that way. Nothing today really changed, or really this week even changed the narrative of we're slowing a little bit, but not slowing enough for the Federal Reserve, and both not slowing enough in terms of inflation, and we still have a fairly robust labor market. So it does seem like they're locked in for July. Obviously, the big question is they have priced in 2 more increases this year. Did they do another one after July? You know, we'll have to see a little bit more data to figure that out. The other thing I would point out on this jobs report today, really, really great data around women in the labor force. We talked a lot on this program about the She Session 3 years ago. We all thought women were never going to come back. Then there were all the childcare woes and schooling woes. And to be sitting here today with prime age women, the 25 to 54-year-old cohort, at a record high again in June is it's remarkable.
On the other hand, Black unemployment was higher for the second month in a row, a 10-month high of 6%. And I think this is concerning not just for Black workers, but in terms of what it means for potential recession. Steve, any thoughts on that?
We seem to have gotten through the point in the expansion that was the best period for service workers, for people who might have been on the margins of the labor force before. It doesn't mean it's bad. Some of these numbers, particularly Black unemployment, can be a little fluky month to month because of their smaller sample size. So you don't want to draw too many conclusions. But we know from other numbers that this isn't quite the same frenzy of hiring that people felt back in 2021 and the first part of 2022. And so the Fed has accomplished a little bit of what it wanted in cooling the economy, just not anywhere close to what its mandate suggests. And when you've got wage growth above 4%, when you've got inflation still way above what the Fed's target is, they do need to step in and keep on whatever their track has been of trying to slow things down. But it's funny to see how people have gotten back into the instead of the hard landing, soft landing, back into the no landing idea that maybe things just go on for a while until there's some kind of shock to the economy. And that's a very good place to be, despite everything that the Fed has been doing in the last year or so.
Yeah, and along those lines, Heather, I wanted to talk to you about some other data out this week showing that we may be in sort of a sweet spot for the jobs market. Job openings were lower in May, according to the JOLTS survey. But people are still quitting jobs and apparently able to find new ones pretty quickly. How much power do workers have right now in this market?
We're finally seeing a labor market that works how most people, when they come out of school, think it should work, which is that there's a lot of opportunities and that they don't just have to stay in cycling through a bunch of low-wage jobs. I think what's been really encouraging about the Great Resignation trend, or really the trading up, it's been a trading up for a lot of people, is to go from jobs that were not paying well and that were often in the hospitality sector, that they wouldn't last for very long, to when you interview people, as you have on this show, and is people now feel they have careers, that they've been able to move, whether it's into doing something working from home for a professional business capacity or moving into healthcare type of roles. And, that's a huge shift. It's a huge shift up in income and pay that many people are getting. It's a huge shift up in quality of life. You see these happiness and job surveys have really ticked up lately. And I think we don't fully know how this is going to play out, but you hope that it makes the economy more productive, workers happier, and it continues to allow people to keep spending because they are getting paid more.
Here's hoping. That was Heather Long at the Washington Post, Sudeep Reddy with Politico. Thank you both so much and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Amy. Take care.
Bye, Amy.
On Wall Street today, as I said, not impressed. We'll have details when we do the numbers. A not small chunk of that job growth we were just talking about came from state and local governments. Together, they added about 60,000 jobs in June. And overall, government agencies are hiring at a much faster pace than last year. We asked Marketplace's Sabri Benishore to find out what's going on.
On average, state and local governments from Hawaii to Maryland have been collectively hiring 57,000 people per month this year. That is more than double the rate last year.
The number of new faces I see around Corvallis, it's a big number.
Patrick Rollins is with the city of Corvallis, Oregon, population 59,000. The city hired 312 people this past fiscal year to work part-time and full-time jobs, increasing the city government workforce by 60%. That is 60. A lot of it was service jobs.
So public works, parks and recreation, a lot in public safety, so police and fire.
During the pandemic, places like libraries and pools shut down or needed fewer workers, and then ramped back up. Mike Bartlett is a program manager with the National League of Cities.
This is still actually cities, counties, states recovering from the pandemic.
A lot of local governments had to spend more during the pandemic, think handing out laptops to school kids, while getting less in taxes. Local government jobs shrank by 4.5%, which Bartlett says is 18 times the loss in the private sector. The recovery is not complete. Brian Platt is the city manager of Kansas City, Missouri.
We're down about 10% of our workforce from pre-pandemic levels.
Platt says Kansas City has become leaner and more efficient during the pandemic and doesn't need as many workers as before, but it still needs to hire some.
We've got positions open everywhere. It could be city planners, attorneys, but also labor employees that are out picking up trash and plowing snow.
The bounce back in local government employment nationwide has been faster than in previous economic downturns, says Kate Bond with the Urban Institute.
And this is also a marked difference from the recovery from the Great Recession, where public sector work really, really lagged for years in the recovery.
Uncle Sam chipped in a lot more this time with pandemic relief packages. One of the lessons from the Great Recession is that getting local governments financially on their feet helps economic recovery overall. In New York, I'm Sabri Benishore for Marketplace.
We've talked on the show recently about a boom in housing construction, especially apartments. Many, though, are in luxury buildings filled with amenities aimed at high-earning renters. At the other end of the spectrum, very low-cost rentals are getting much harder to find. A new report from Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies found that the number of rentals costing less than $600 a month fell by nearly 4 million units in the decade ending in 2021. And yes, that's adjusted for inflation. The stock of low-cost housing declined in every state, but especially in formerly more affordable places like Texas and North Carolina. Marketplace's Matt Levin has more.
Texas lost more than 500,000 low-cost rentals over the last decade. Meanwhile, the number of units charging over $2,000 a month tripled. Jolie Angel Robinson is with the Dallas area homelessness agency Housing Forward.
When we begin to see naturally occurring affordable housing removed for development, the individuals that were living there have very few options on where to live.
Naturally occurring affordable housing is basically cheap enough for low-income people to afford it without a government subsidy. Alex Herman is a housing researcher at Harvard.
These tend to be older units in some cases might not be particularly desirable in terms of their location or the kind of amenity value of those units.
Herman says some of those are being renovated or rehabbed to attract higher income renters, but many look just the same and are getting more expensive simply because there's more demand. Demand partly coming from Californians and others in high-cost states looking for cheaper housing.
If you look at where the decline in the stock, the low-cost stock has been sharpest, it's where rental housing used to be more affordable. So states like Arizona, Nevada, and Texas.
If you're searching for a silver lining in all of this, you can find it in the more than 500,000 new apartments that were under construction last year, a multi-decade high. Economist Igor Popov at Apartment List says that should help relieve some rent pressures eventually.
So what we have are thankfully some newer units coming online. That'll help us in 20 years.
20 years. Not so much help for lower income renters today. I'm Matt Levin for Marketplace.
Coming up,
the uncertainties feel like they are all the more present.
Hovering, you might say. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 187 points, 0.5%, to finish at 33,734. The Nasdaq dipped 18 points, 0.1%, to close at 13,660. And the S&P 500 lost 12 points, 0.3%, to end at 4398. For the week, the Dow tumbled 2%, the Nasdaq sank just under 1%. The S&P 500 dropped 1.2%. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also released its latest report on hourly earnings in the United States. The June average for all private employment is $33.58, up 20% from June of 2019. The highest pay was found in the information sector, which includes everything from securities traders to IT professionals to folks in the movie industry. Bonds fell. The yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 4.06%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Extend. Extend turns credit cards into spend management tools so businesses can control payments and expenses with the power of virtual cards. More at paywithextend.com.
I'm Ed German. Join me on Friday nights for Friday Night Soul here on 88.3 FM WLIW and WLIW.org/radio for the best in soul, Latin soul, disco, and old school hip hop. That's Friday at 8 p.m. at 88.3 WLIW FM and WLIW.org/radio, Long Island's only NPR station.
Hi, I'm Diane Michelli, General Manager of WLIW-FM, here to say thank you for making our June fundraising campaign a great success. We look forward to continuing to serve Long Island with music you love and news you can trust, right here on listener-supported WLIW-FM, Long Island's only NPR station. Thank you and keep listening.
This is Marketplace. I'm Amy Scott. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is midway through a trip to China with the stated goal of finding areas of common economic ground at a time of heightened tensions between the two largest economies in the world. Also on that trip is our very own Kai Ryssdal. He's been traveling with Yellen's press pool, and we caught up with him in Beijing this morning. Well, it was nighttime for him. Hey, Kai.
Hi, Amy.
So what can you tell us about the Secretary's visit so far?
Well, so far, I think the key thing that the Secretary is trying to get across to the Chinese and also, honestly, to the world is that she and the Biden administration are really intent on making sure that the Chinese government understands that what they are looking for in the White House and at Treasury is not decoupling as the headlines would have it, but rather engagement and healthy competition. Fair competition is what the Secretary says. And look, it's a tricky hill that she has to climb here because tensions are very high and the relationship is at its lowest point in some years.
What kinds of meetings is she having? Are you seeing any signs of progress in that relationship?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned progress because we got a background briefing from a senior Treasury official last night, I guess, after we got here. And he specifically said, we're not looking for any big breakthroughs. We want to establish a floor for this relationship. And we really want to make sure that the Chinese understand that when we take certain steps to strengthen our national security, it's not meant to gain an economic advantage over China. And what we are looking for here is for us to stay engaged and for the world's two biggest economies to have a dialogue. She's had meetings today with the American Chamber of Commerce. She had a meeting with Premier Li Qiang today. And she's got more meetings tomorrow. And I think the general through line is to American businesses, it's, look, we are here for you. We understand that there are some challenges doing business in China. And with the Chinese government, it is, let's keep talking and let's keep this relationship going.
You have spent quite a bit of time in China over the years. How does your visit now compare to the last time you were there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking today of the last time I was actually in Beijing, and it was 2015. And, I've been coming to China on and off for 30 years, personally and professionally. And the thing that always amazes me every time I come back, no matter how long it's been, is how fast the change is, the pace of change and the velocity with which this economy moves. I mean, there's a generation of young people now who are 18, 19, 20 years old, who this is what they know. They know the Chanels and the luxury brands and the nice cars. And they now have some disposable income that they can spend on it. I was talking to Jennifer today, Jennifer Pack, our Shanghai correspondent, who came up to do a little walking through town with me today. And she said, yeah, that's absolutely right. And the ambition and the aspirational capitalism is what's driving this country.
Marketplace's Kai Ryssdal, traveling with the U.S. Treasury Secretary. We look forward to hearing more of your reporting. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy. Talk to you soon.
One source of tension between the U.S. and China is chips, with each country trying to restrict the other's access to advanced semiconductors or the technology and materials to make them. Pulling back to look at the overall chip industry, a once severe shortage earlier in the pandemic has turned into a supply glut. The South Korean electronics company Samsung said this week it's expecting a big drop in quarterly profits, making it the latest chip maker to see a downturn in sales in recent months. The semiconductor industry supplies important components for smartphones, laptops, and cars, etc., and it's notoriously cyclical. But this latest bust may be nearing an end, as Marketplace's Henry Epp reports.
Consumers stuck at home buying electronics created a surge in demand for chips, and manufacturers responded, says Willie Shih, a professor of management practice at Harvard Business School.
Everybody built up a lot. They ordered a lot of chips. Inevitably, what happens is they overshoot the mark.
So chip makers produced enough to meet those big orders, but when demand dropped off, they were left holding the bag.
And now we're working off all that excess inventory. It's kind of a classic cyclical behavior in this business.
This particular downturn may be nearing an end for a few reasons. One, a handful of companies have seen surging interest in chips that power artificial intelligence systems.
The AI chip demand is going to be the leading indicator out of this glut.
Doug O'Loughlin writes a Substack on the chip industry called Fabricated Knowledge. Even outside of AI, he says chip makers have some hope for the second half of the year as people start to replace those phones and laptops they bought a few years ago, and consumers turn to back to school and holiday shopping.
The whole industry has optimism that things are going to get less bad.
So as the most recent vicious cycle fades into the industry's rear view, did they learn anything to avoid the next one? Well, they tried, but it's difficult to predict demand, says Stacy Raskin, a senior analyst at Bernstein Research.
You got to remember the semiconductors are at the back of the supply chain. There's a lot of stages between them making a part and you actually buying a product with that part in it. There's lots of different stages along that chain.
Raskin sums up an old saying by an industry leader. Semiconductor companies are like the caboose of a train. They can only guess if the engine is moving. I'm Henry Epp for Marketplace.
Next week, we'll get a read on how people are feeling about the U.S. economy with an early take on consumer sentiment from the University of Michigan. As of June, Americans were feeling more optimistic about the state of the economy and inflation, though many economists expect a slowdown in consumer spending thanks to higher interest rates and the return of federal student loan payments. To hear how one business is faring amidst the uncertainty, we checked in with Kristen Thalheimer Bingham, owner of Dean Sweets in Portland, Maine.
The rest of the summer will get busier and busier. At least I hope we will. Since Mother's Day, we've been focusing on day-to-day sales, which, as the weather improves, is better and better. We've had some graduation orders and graduation gifts. We've also launched a new chocolate in mid-May called our Cherry Bourbon Bonbon, which is just as great as it sounds. Typically for us and for Maine in general, the busiest part of the summer is mid to late July and August. That's when we get large groups of families and children, a lot of parents dropping kids off at camp and spending a long weekend in Portland. Our website sales slow down a little bit this time of year, but our walk-in traffic for our 2 stores definitely picks up. There are foodie tours that come through our stores every day, and that's a lot of fun. And there's just a lot more people and a lot more activity this time of year, especially as the summer progresses. Really does feel like consumer spending has been all over the place. We are having a good summer, but it feels like every day is different. You know, for one day, we'll have great sales, and then the next day we'll have almost nothing. And then for a week, it'll be fabulous and we'll hit the numbers we need. And then the next week, it drops back down again. Our second quarter this year was not as good as our second quarter last year. And not so bad that we really need to worry about it, but I hope we'll get our wonderful Maine summer and people will travel here and find us. There's a lot we can do now to build up our stock on items we sell all year and also holiday items. These are chocolates that are very shelf stable that we can make now and be ready for the rush that happens in October, November, and December. So that's a really big focus for us in the summer months. I am hopeful. Right now, we just really need to stay prepared and watch how things go. But the uncertainties feel like they are all the more present.
That was Kristen Thalheimer Bingham at Dean Sweets in Portland, Maine. This final note on the way out today, the AI revolution may have hit a speed bump. The Washington Post reports that ChatGPT saw a drop in traffic last month, the first since it launched in November. Mobile and desktop visits fell by almost 10% in June, and downloads of the mobile app have fallen too. Analysts say users may have soured on the many problems with generative chatbots, like misinformation and useless answers. Or maybe the Post acknowledges students using it to write papers just went on summer break.
Marketplace is supported by JLL. For 240 years, JLL has been committed to offering trusted and innovative solutions in leasing, management, investment strategies, and technology. JLL.com. See a brighter way.
Here's your moment of economic context. Average global temperatures set another unofficial record yesterday, according to the University of Maine's Climate Reanalyzer. It was the fourth day of record hot temperatures this week, which scientists attribute to a combination of a seasonal El Niño pattern in the Pacific Ocean and human-caused climate change from emissions of heat-trapping greenhouse gases. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal reports U.S. oil production is on track for a record-breaking year. Our theme music was composed by B.J. Liederman. Marketplace's executive producer is Nancy Fargali. Donna Tam is the executive editor. Neil Scarborough is the vice president and general manager. And I'm Amy Scott. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday. This is APM.